Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nicholas Logothetis, Concordia, and the Right Honorable Sir Tony Blair of the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure for me to welcome a man who needs no introduction, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and dare I say, my friend, Tony Blair. We don't have too much time, so I'm going to go right into the questions. You just came back from the funeral of Her Majesty the Queen, and I wonder if you could give us a few reflections on what the last few weeks have been like, and maybe a few thoughts about your experience dealing with Her Majesty when you were Prime Minister.
Well, thank you, Nick, and thank you to everyone at Concordia for inviting me here. It's a great pleasure to be with you. And well, there's been so much written and spoken about in respect of Her Majesty. But, I mean, she was a huge unifying figure for the country, and she performed her task of steering the monarchy through an extraordinary period of change. I mean, if you think what Britain is now in 2022 and what it was in 1952, it's a remarkable achievement to have managed to maintain that dignity and decency and duty, sense of duty, really. So, I mean, for me, it was very strange because I'd grown up with the Queen. The very first time I saw her as Prime Minister, I went into Buckingham Palace and well, actually, she said to me, "You are my 10th Prime Minister. The first was Winston Churchill, and that was before you were born." But actually, just before we'd done that, there is a strange ceremony that you go through to become Prime Minister. You win the election. We have no transitional period in the UK. So you win the election on late Thursday night. Friday morning, you're the Prime Minister, but you're not the Prime Minister until you go to the palace, and there's a ceremony called the kissing of hands. And obviously I was concentrating on the campaign. I went to Buckingham Palace. I had this vague thought about this ceremony called kissing hands, but I didn't quite know what it meant. And just before I was about to go into the throne room, the Lord Chamberlain, who was standing there, said to me, "Mr. Blair," because you're Mr. Blair before you go and become Prime Minister, he said, "Mr. Blair, I should tell you, ceremony of kissing the hands, you don't actually kiss the hands, you brush them." What do you mean, brush them? What does brushing the hands mean? So anyway, I'm thinking about this as I go in, the door's thrown open, I go in the door, and because I'm concentrating on what on earth it means, I trip on a piece of carpet just in front of the Queen and throne, and literally I don't kiss her hands or brush them, I kind of envelop them, really. So anyway, that was but she was very gracious, very kind, and a great person to deal with. Yeah. So.
I'm a British citizen and an American citizen, and so she's been the Queen for my whole life as well. And it's very strange that, for instance, there's going to be a different person on the money, on the coins, on everything. So it's certainly the end of an era.
Yeah, we are a citizen of one country with a monarch. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other country got rid of us.
Yes, they did. So I'm sort of torn. On Thanksgiving, I don't know what to do.
I know, Thanksgiving is... how are you celebrating Thanksgiving? Well...
Turning to Ukraine, you obviously knew Vladimir Putin. You entered office in 1997. He came as president in 2000. I saw the other day that his first foreign trip was to the UK when you met him, when he became president. Obviously, in the past 24 hours, things have gotten a little hotter, let's say, in terms of President Putin calling up a mobilization of 300,000, I think, Russian troops or Russian reservists. I guess the question is, just to get to the heart of the point, because there's a lot to discuss and we don't have that much time. Do you think it is beyond the realm of possibility that Vladimir Putin would use chemical or tactical nuclear weapons in the event that traditional warfare doesn't achieve what he wants?
Well, beyond the realm of possibility is a high bar. Do I think it likely? No. But, I mean, one of the important reflections about Ukraine is that the decision by Putin to invade Ukraine is an illustration of why democracy is really a better system than a dictatorship. I mean, the truth of the matter is that in a democracy, no leader would ever be in a situation where they weren't given the correct information or weren't given the right advice to say to them, look, if you're invading Ukraine, it's a peaceful country, a democratically elected president. You didn't need a huge amount of intelligence to know that Ukrainians would fight to defend their country. You just needed to send someone as a tourist and they'd come back and tell you. And my institute has a project in Ukraine. I've been there virtually every year since leaving office. It was always going to be an extraordinarily tough fight. And the Ukrainians have shown immense courage, but also skill. So Russia, as we know, has essentially suffered a serious and fundamental defeat there. Does that tip Putin into an act of complete desperation? I hope not. I believe not, because the response would be overwhelming. And you've got to hope that judgment is maintained. But you're dealing with someone who is unpredictable and someone who has put his country in a terrible position. So beyond the realm of possibility is a very high bar. I think it highly unlikely, but I think the strategy that we have employed up to now is correct, which is to give Ukrainians every help to fight this battle, to fight it successfully, and then hopefully to create the space for an end to the conflict on terms that they will accept.
Does it worry you that the coalition, as it were, or the sort of group of countries that are united, the collective West, may be fracturing? I mean, Italy, I don't know exactly when the election is, but it seems that if Miss Meloni is elected, won't necessarily be in favor of such tough sanctions. Does it worry you going forward?
No, on the whole, I think Europe will stick together and hold together. And one of the things that Putin has done, is give NATO back a sense of purpose and give Europe a real sense of unity. And I think that unity is genuine. And if, for these purposes, we treat the UK as part of Europe, let's not go into that. The public opinion in the UK, I think we know we're in for a tough time this winter. I mean, the cost of living crisis is the top political issue everywhere in Europe. But I don't think people are under any illusions. If you allow this act of aggression to succeed, for sure, if he succeeded in Ukraine, he won't now. But if he had, then it may well not have been the last act of aggression. The whole of Eastern Europe would have felt threatened. So I think, despite the problems, Europe will hold together. And just to emphasize, particularly to an American audience, the decisions European leaders are taking, particularly Chancellor Scholz in Germany, to release Germany from dependence on Russian gas. You can all argue, how did they get there? But that decision now that he's taking is massive, and it indicates that people in Europe, I think, understand what is at stake and will not flinch.
Yeah. And it needed a crisis to do that, I think, right?
Yeah, it needed to be reminded. Look, it was if you'd asked me, and people did, in the build-up to the 24th of February, do you think Putin will invade Ukraine? In the sense of trying to take the country over, displace a democratically elected president? I was saying to people then, no, I don't think he'll do that. So I think what this has done, and this is where the relevance is then to China, what this has done is it's disabused us. It's poured a bucket of cold water over any complacent notion that big war conflict is not possible.
Yeah.
Big country conflict, rather, is not possible. So I think it's certainly given NATO and Europe back its unity, and of course Sweden and Finland are now applying to join.
Yeah. So you mentioned China. There's been this very well publicized partnership with no limits between the Russian and the Chinese governments. Obviously, China is its own riddle wrapped within whatever Winston Churchill said about the Soviet Union. Yes. But you dealt with Chinese leaders for 10 years, and I'm sure since then as well. What do you think about this partnership? Do you think it's a partnership of, obviously there's a significant junior partner there, and secondly, just in general, what do you think the Chinese leadership is looking to achieve in the next 10 and 20 years?
I think the Chinese leadership now will be asking itself quite a lot of questions. I mean, first of all, I've got no doubt at all they think that Putin's actions have been a disaster. I think in the recent summit, they may have said it was without limits, but I think they placed quite strong limits on it, actually. I think that China, it's a different system. It's a different economic power. I mean, the Russian economy this is pre-conflict, is roughly 70% the size of the UK's. The Chinese economy is one of the two biggest economies in the world. It's an ancient civilization, 1.3 billion people. It's got, extraordinary attributes in technology and in culture and so on. The Chinese system is not the same as the Russian system. So I think there will be a lot of reflection in the Chinese leadership. Xi Jinping has obviously got a very tight grip on power. On the other hand, there are many, many capable people in China, and this will be under the surface, a contested position. I think the more difficult question is for us in the West as to how we deal with China. And in the speech I gave a few weeks ago, I said I thought we needed a policy of strength plus engagement. In other words, we need to be strong enough militarily, in technology, to deal with whatever comes out of China, because this new leadership has been much more aggressive. But I still think it's important to engage with China and to realize that whatever disagreements we have with its leadership, we need to keep the people-to-people relationships, and we need to recognize that China will be a major power in the world. And so it's the biggest, we will get through Ukraine, hopefully, as best we can, as I say, on the right terms for Ukraine and its sovereignty and the Ukrainian people. But I think the bigger, really tough challenge is what our relationship should be with China for the 21st century, and that'll be the single biggest geopolitical set of decisions that we have to make.
Yeah. Switching back a little closer to home in the remaining time we have left in the UK, obviously a new Prime Minister just took office, has a term of a little over 2 years to serve. What's your view of UK politics at the moment? And I mean, it would seem that it's going to be a challenging time for any Prime Minister of the United Kingdom for the next 2 years.
Well, we've got 1.5 minutes, so you're going to get the abbreviated version. And for those of you who are studying the UK from the outside, I mean, it must seem as if we're changing Prime Ministers quite regularly at the moment. At Her Majesty's funeral, there was quite a long line of former Prime Ministers.
I saw that.
Look, I think the most important thing for Britain, we've done Brexit. Obviously, I was passionately opposed to it. We've done it. We've got to work out now what are the policies, the best policies to produce growth, to raise productivity, and to give ourselves a clear place in the world. And that is going to be, it's a challenge for whoever is Prime Minister. And the one thing that I've learned since leaving office, and when you do leave office, you're able to sort of look at the world differently, and you're able to study the world sometimes with the time and often with the energy to do it in a different way than when you're actually in office. And my reflection for the Western world today is that the biggest problem in Western politics is politics.
Yeah.
Right? It's that in the end, the 21st century is going to be about practical solutions to practical problems. It's going to be, particularly in my view, about harnessing the technology revolution with all its enormous possibilities, but also with all the displacement effects that it will have. And that essentially means you analyze the world, you understand it, and then you get the best minds and the best practical policy to get the best solutions. Is that how you would define either British or Western politics today? No. So I think whether it's in the UK government or wherever else, the most important thing now is to return to that central task of, in a vastly changing world, geopolitically with China, in terms of real world with the technology revolution, how do we make the best of it for our people? And that requires less ideology and better policy.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for coming to Concordia. Please take a look at the Tony Blair Institute. is it Tony Blair for Global Change, right? It's a fascinating organization that is doing some amazing work around the world, and we couldn't be more proud to have you here. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick, and thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.